Okay, so what I did here was I drew two leaves, sort of leaf shapes that are here. And the next thing that we're going to use is this, which is Frisket paper. And Frisket paper comes in a pack like this. It also comes in a roll. And what it is this sheet of sort of like acrylic paper. It's sort of like what we used to use on shelving before. And you peel this apart. And if you've done airbrushing before, you've probably used this before. And you put it down onto your paper. And you sort of make sure it's kind of like nice and neat. You put it down. And then you need to use your X-Acto blade that you have here so that you can cut out the shape that you have here. So I'm just going to cut along here. You press firmly but lightly because you don't want to cut the paper. You're just looking to cut the Frisket paper. Okay? And then with your knife, you can pick this up. Some people save this because if you're going to do something around here, you can take this piece of Frisket paper and put it back. All right? You might want to also take something and put some detailing in here as well, which we could probably do right now if we wanted to. I'm going to cut this out of here because and maybe put these sort of in the middle here to give it, I've cut this out from the one that we just did. So we can put this right here from the middle. There we go, and stick it down. And again, so what you might want to do with this is you might want to take a natural sponge, and a natural sponge is better than a man-made sponge because it has all this texture to it. If you use a regular sponge, the texture is kind of consistent and kind of predictable, but this is really good because it has, all the different textures that are on here and are a little bit different. So one thing that you might want to do is to fool around with color. I would take some people dump it, into paint and do it that way. I like to brush it on. I feel that it just goes on easier. And you might want to test on a separate piece of paper the texture, and then come back with your sponge and sponge onto your motif so that you get this texture on here. You may want to fool around with two colors. So I would recommend for you to always use a different sponge for that, or wash the one that you have and put the colors down with that. And of course the edges are very important because you get that sort of textury look to it. And I'm going to cut this in half so I can get this part of the Frisket paper off. And then I lift this up. Now of course you should always wait to let it dry before you peel it up. And of course I decided to do my center as well. I could have probably burnished it down a little bit more so you get that. But there you have a whole textured kind of look with just using the sponge. Another technique you may want to use is taking again the same motif, cutting it out as neatly as possible. I'm doing this very quickly for the interest of time. And peeling it up. I think it looks good with the center, so I think I'm going to cut the center out as well. Just something very simple. I'm going to slap this in the middle here, just to give it a kind of a detailing. Make sure you press down around the edges so nothing goes inside. And then another thing you may want to do is to take an old toothbrush. As you can see, I've used this one to death. I had to go out and buy a new one, but an old toothbrush. And if you get a plastic knife, we're always into recycling, so recycle your old, any plastic knife that you get, don't throw it away, save it, because you could use this for many things, and your old toothbrush. And then what I would do is I would take this and dunk it into your paint. And this is what's considered a poor man's airbrush. So what you would do is take it and just keep it at an angle and just let the paint splatter into the design, and it leads for a very sort of subtle look. It'll be better when I put the other thing in here also. You could also the stippling could be hard, light, however you feel like you want to do it. I actually probably shouldn't have used this color, I don't have much of it left, but in the interest of time, you can still see what's going on. And you could see that it starts to stipple and form a texture. You just have to be careful that with this, you need to get some paper and tape it around the outside of this and cover that. Because if you stipple and it goes outside that line is going to stay on the paper. I'm going to start using the red here a little bit on this side. Okay, now of course we should always wait for this to dry, but again, I'm going to throw some orange in just for the heck of it. Okay, we should always wait for it to dry before we get finished, but since we need to move on, you take your paper, you peel it off, and then I'm going to take off the center. Let's see, I don't want it to be, there we go. Okay, and you get that sort of stoned figure kind of motif that's there with that texture on it. Now, of course, again, I said it before, I did this very, very quickly. You can choose to do it a lot more controlled, with more detail. You can add things to it to make it interesting, and you'll see that it starts to form a pattern. One other thing that you may want to use is this stencil paper. And what you could do with this is on the stencil paper,